so we can go ahead and begin. Thank you everybody for joining us for our webinar today, all about mapping out your application narrative. We're really excited to be bringing together two really awesome panelists and kind of discussing this topic more extensively. So thank you again for joining us. Before we begin, I just want to touch base on what we'll be talking about. So first, we'll be talking about what an application narrative actually is and how you can use it. Second, we'll be talking about determining your application narrative, how you can figure out what narrative is going to work for you. And then we'll touch on how to start developing your narrative, ensuring that you tell a cohesive story. And then the last slide will be tips for developing an impactful narrative. And then we'll have a Q&A section. So if you have any questions throughout the webinar, I'd ask that you kind of hang on to them until we get to that Q&A section, and then our panelists will answer those questions for you. Just to kind of introduce our panelists to you guys. Hold on here. Oh, sorry, before we do that, just want to explain a little bit about who we are. So we're Inspira Advantage. We're a college consulting company that's dedicated to helping deserving students get into the school of their dreams. Our experts have helped applicants like you get into top medical schools, and you can see our stats over there. So yeah, definitely give us check us out when we're done with this webinar. Just to go over our panelists, we have Dr. Jason Gomez and Dr. Bima Hassim. Jason, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself first, and then Bima, you afterwards.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Jason Gomez. I went to Stanford for both medical school and also for my MBA. Prior to that, I was at Harvard. I spent a lot of my time on research and also some volunteer activities, particularly helping vulnerable populations. I also have, I took 2 gap years in between undergrad and medical school. And during my time at Stanford, I primarily focused on helping the admissions committee. So have experience sitting on the admissions committee and seeing kind of what they're looking for in terms of your application. And after medical school, I was doing too much in dermatology, and I'm currently a founder of my own healthcare startup.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Bima Hassim. I am currently a third-year general surgery resident at UC Irvine, currently in my research years with an interest in abdominal transplant surgery. I am an anteater lifer, so I went to UCI for undergrad, medical school, and residency. And along the way, I felt like it takes a village to, at least for me, to get into where I am today. And so I tried to give back and help out. And since then, I've been involved as a med student in the pre-med process, and then as a resident in the med student pathway. And so, yeah, hoping to help others out, and feel free to, and looking forward to the rest of this webinar.
Amazing. Thanks so much. All right, let's get started. What is an application narrative? Bima, can you let us know? Oh, sorry, I think you're on mute.
Agreed. Sorry about that. Yeah, so this can be a little bit of a daunting task to put down on paper, but your application narrative is essentially your story of how you get into your medical school admissions process, your application as a whole. The job of your personal statement is supposed to be part of this, but the personal statement is just a small part of the central theme of what your application should look like, or the story that it tells. So it encompasses all aspects of your application, from your personal statement to your extracurriculars, and presents a cohesive image of who you are.
Sorry, Jason, you want to take next slide?
Absolutely. In terms of why an application narrative is important, to add to what Bima was saying, this is really the admissions committee's understanding of who you are as a person. And so it's really important to try to be as consistent as possible from your primary, your personal statement, your secondaries. It tells us who you are, and it gives us a sense of who we'll meet when you're invited to an interview. And so this is all encompassing. It can be, you know, really at the core, it's what drew you to medicine, why you want to be a physician, and kind of explaining the why of all of the activities that you did. And so you want to make sure you have as strong of a narrative as possible that's consistent so that we can really understand, again, your values, your journey, and the type of future physician and colleague that you would be.
Okay, let's touch on determining your application narrative.
All right. And just to hop off of what Dr. Gomez just said, I think the future physician and future colleague, the future colleague part is really important in what admissions committees are looking at too. And so we'll start with your background information, your personal history, including where you're from, your family, and your upbringing, and any significant experiences or challenges you faced. Where I see the pitfall for this is pre-med or applicants will try to fit everything that has happened from their birth to up to this point of them applying. And so I try, don't do that. All of your events of what led you up to this point has a common thread, and try to synthesize or distill what all of those events and that common thread is into your application. Your coursework and official transcripts, that will be kind of like your nitty-gritty numbers, which doesn't really I would say it's kind of, I guess when you're thinking about a narrative, that those things are not really modifiable, because then the numbers are kind of, it is what it is. I would say that it is, in terms of, I know people get stressed out with the MCAT and thinking about the MCAT and GPA. For what I tell applicants is there's just a threshold that you need to get over, and after that, everyone is essentially in an equal playing field. But Dr. Gomez, feel free to add on to that based off of your experience.
Yeah, completely agree with what was said previously. Other things you want to make sure that you tie in as well are your work and activities, your letters of recommendation, your personal statement and essays. Going back to what we discussed on the previous slide, this doesn't need to be every single activity you've been involved with. I think you want to present the activities that are the most impactful, really quality over quantity, and that tie back into your narrative, whether it's, really service oriented or more academic and research focused, or speaking to, just more of your mentor inspired, change maker, advocacy narratives. You really want to pick the activities that really represent who you are, and also your interests and what you would want to continue to do as a medical student and eventually as a physician.
So diving a little bit deeper into that personal statement, and you'll want to craft a clear and concise statement where you showcase your motivations. Your personal statement is the heart of your narrative. Try to focus on, articulating your motivations for pursuing medicine. Try to think about the prompt and answer that prompt as concisely as you can. I know that seems obvious, but sometimes applicants can lose sidetracked of the bigger question that's being asked and go into many different avenues that doesn't necessarily answer why medicine in particular. You'll want to tie in your experiences, but don't just remember that you have other parts of the application where you can go a little bit deeper into those experiences in the experience section. So try not to repeat yourself in the personal statement. And then, focus on your strengths and aspirations. I would say your aspirations is a nice part to include in your conclusion, because your aspirations isn't necessarily what will pop up later on. There's no other part of the application where you can put in your aspirations, not necessarily. So a personal putting in your personal statement is a good spot for that. And yeah, just be concise. Ensure that your passion and purpose comes through in every sentence. Every character counts.
And you also want to make sure that when you're building up your personal statement, that your secondary application, again, is consistent with the narrative, but that you're also adding net new information. So to the extent that you can, you do not want to repeat any of the same information as you have in your primary or your personal statement. And the secondary application is really a way to differentiate yourself and how you would fit into that school's mission. And so you can have, your narrative that's consistent, but you can tailor it to the mission of the school. So every school will have on their website kind of what their mission is, and will give you keywords, whether it's research and innovation or education, et cetera, that you can kind of see how your narrative can play to those strengths and target those schools to show that your experience is aligned with what they're looking for, that you share the same values or the same interests, and that'll make your secondary application stronger as well.
And so this is going into your interview. So bringing your application to life. The interview is your chance to bring your narrative off the page, where you can demonstrate your passion, personality, and fit into the school as in person. Unfortunately, I think some med schools are still doing Zoom, including the University of California system. But I would say for this, just be mindful of what you put in your primary application. Don't put anything in there that you wouldn't want to talk about in your interview. So for example, a lot of people are involved in research, and being in research can have a lot of jargon in it, and that might be tough to understand. And if you're kind of caught in an interview bumbling through the things that are regurgitated by your principal investigator without necessarily knowing too much about it, then that wouldn't look as positively. So just be mindful of what you put down and be prepared to expand on that.
Okay, just want to jump in here because I know we went through a lot of information already, and use this opportunity as a little stretch break, maybe stand up, walk around, and listen to my little spiel. We're at our midway check-in point, and I want to share that because you are listening to this webinar and you've signed up, you will qualify for 10% off of a free entire program if you book a free consultation with us. So the QR code is there. The code is there. And remember, this is for your entire program. If you use this code, you'll get 10% off for that. So please, if you want to get more really insight information from like the information that we're getting from our panelists, please feel free to use this code. All right, back to our regular scheduled programming. We'll touch on how to start developing your application narrative.
The first place to start is really asking yourself a lot of questions to try to understand and start brainstorming what's been motivating your decision to pursue medicine and kind of participate in all the activities that you have that have prepared you for your career as a physician. And so here are a couple of questions that we recommend you ask yourself. Things like, what qualities or traits do I have that would make me a great medical school candidate and future physician? How do my work, activities, and life experiences demonstrate those core competencies? What are my strengths and weaknesses? And really reflecting on how these impact your application and your journey as a future physician. Other questions that I have students reflect on are, what motivated you to pursue a career in medicine? What matters to you? And really asking yourself why. Why did I participate in this research? Why was it so important to me to volunteer in XYZ or pursue kind of everything that you have and what you're passionate about, so that you can start to see what some of the common threads are. And this will also help, as you're reflecting, give you stories for your personal statement, for your secondary applications, really thinking about, the qualities they're looking for in a physician too, whether it's times that you were a leader or times where you advocated for someone or times where, you brought a different perspective or experienced and overcame a challenge. So all of these things can be really helpful in asking yourself just to bring out some of those themes and threads to the surface. And you might have multiple, and in which case you can determine, which is the one that resonates with you most, and pursue that.
And so going into the core competencies, and you can find this online, and I'll drop a link in the chat in a second, but there's 15 of them that the AMCs has identified as important for medical students to succeed in medical school, or pre-med students to succeed in medical school. They're pretty self-explanatory, like critical thinking, scientific inquiry, understanding human behavior, being ethical, etc. These are things that are good to keep in mind as you're crafting your narrative, like Dr. Gomez said. And I think just making sure that you don't necessarily have to, craft your entire application to hit all 15. Don't think of it as like a checkbox, but just make sure that you're not necessarily, I guess, going the opposite direction of all these other core competencies. And one thing to also help you brainstorm certain experiences that may fulfill these core competencies is, talking about, or your path with close friends or people that you trust their advice on, your parents, etc., because they will be able to see, I'm sure if you made it up to this point, they'll be able to kind of pull out the threads of what makes you special and why they think you can succeed in medical school.
After you spend some time reflecting, the next step is really identifying the main theme that makes you you. Now, again, you might have multiple different themes, and all of these experiences are you, but you really want to focus on a central theme that reflects your core values, all of your experiences, both, what you've done academically or scholarly activities, but also, extracurricular activities, and you can even tie it to any personal experiences that you think are aligned with that, and really the qualities that would make you stand out as a future physician. And once you have that main theme identified, it's much easier to use that as your guiding North Star around organizing your thoughts, whether it's looking at those 15 competencies and seeing which ones resonate with that theme, reflecting on all of your experiences, and using the theme as an anchor to really start to pull together your application and what it could look like from a consistent, cohesive narrative to show your strengths, readiness for medical school, and of course, your interest in why medicine.
Okay, let's touch on ensuring that your application tells a cohesive story, which I'm sure is probably one of the most important parts of this entire webinar.
All right. I guess the hardest part is starting and putting words down on paper. So try to focus on themes that talk about how your journey begins with the moment that you were inspired to pursue medicine, highlight key experiences that shaped your path, that led to your decision. I would say that it doesn't necessarily have to be something really inspirational or like really like philosophical in nature. Some of the best personal statements or descriptions of your activities that talk about the central theme are of like events that are relatively mundane. I think I read somewhere about how an applicant, like their best place to study was like McDonald's, and They talked about how like they loved studying in McDonald's and all of the like intricacies of being a part of a relatively small and unique community with other people studying. And they tied it in a way that it was relevant to pursuing a career in medicine. I saw another general surgery residency application about someone who used to work in Chipotle and talked about how like wrapping the burrito and creating the Chipotle burrito itself was really relevant to some of the attributes of becoming a good surgeon. And so as long as you tie it together nicely, although that is a challenge on its own, you don't necessarily have to come up with a really like quote unquote like crazy story of how you like decided that you wanted to pursue medicine. Growth and future goals. So yeah, just reflect on these experiences that contributed to your personal and professional growth. It could literally be anything. There's no correct answer. And yeah, share what you want from this journey to lead in your aspirations as a future physician.
It's also important to, when you're crafting your narrative, you want to address any concerns or any gaps in your resume that the admissions committee might see. So it's always important to acknowledge any challenges you've experienced. So what is a challenge? A challenge could have been poor grades. It could have been, that you took a break from your school. It could be a lack of a certain experience that are also part of your story, and addressing, kind of explaining them and any lessons learned from any of those experiences, which will be important in showing how you can grow. So highlighting how these challenges either allowed you to demonstrate one of these values, being vulnerable, being resilient, or building perseverance as you overcame that challenge, and can really help shape you into a stronger candidate, and really show that you're self-aware and have spent a lot of time reflecting on your experiences and challenges, because again, it's part of who you are, and not everything about you needs to be perfect or about all your many successes. You also want to address any challenges that you've had as well.
And I would say, as you work on your application, try to every few days take a step back and look at your application as a whole. It's good that you guys are in this webinar and you can kind of think about this from a big picture point of view, but try to step back every once in a while, because it can get you could potentially get a little sidetracked if you're too deep into the weeds all the time. So just keep in mind that every part of the application has a character limit. So every character, every word, every sentence needs to count. Of course, you should expand on certain things as they move along in terms of telling a good story. But just keep in mind that your character count is limited, and also keep in mind that whoever's on this other side reading it is reading thousands and maybe even tens of thousands of these applications. And so if everything, the more cohesive you can make your application, the easier it is to read, and the more positive feelings a person on the other side reading it, and them feeling like they actually know you as a person. And also, the letters of recommendation will also further enhance your application, and should hopefully contribute to the overall theme of your application, while also adding different nuances.
And then, of course, we touched on this briefly, but it'll be crucial to tailor your specific narrative and theme to specific schools. This will primarily be in your secondary application, but could even come up during your interviews. And so, again, each school has their own mission statement that will give you clues as to what they really find important and what they're looking for in the future physicians that they are training. And so it's always critical to be able to reference those and see how your narrative matches up. To strengthen your application, what you can also do is reference any specific programs, resources, or values that also align with your application. So this means doing your homework, going through their websites, seeing, what are they devoting their web pages to, talking to any students you might know, or even watching YouTube videos of their faculty discuss what makes their school unique or their training, and that'll really help you just make a stronger case for, if you're passionate about science and innovation, you're really interested in this specific research, or if you have a commitment to global health or a specific service orientation, and you can align that with something that the school offers their students, that will make your application even more powerful and impactful, and also showing the kind of physician you want to be. So there are schools who really value research and innovation, for example, and want to train the next academic physicians. There are other schools that might value, more of the community-based and primary care. So seeing how your own goals fit with what the school's mission is going to be really important to highlight why you're a great fit, why they should choose you, and also what you'll add to their culture, to their community. And so all of that is very important. And of course, you want to make sure that it's genuine. You don't want to tailor your narrative to the mission, you want to make sure that when you're tailoring the narrative to their mission, that you're not changing your narrative or not being the authentic version of yourself, because the school will be able to tell that during an interview. And so you really want to make sure that when you're tailoring your narrative to the specific school, that you're also being honest with yourself. If you're not interested in research, don't say that you want to be an academic physician and do research. Really be honest with yourself, and that'll also help you ultimately end up at the school where you'll be the happiest too.
Yeah, just to echo Dr. Gomez, I know the application process to getting into medical school and residency is brutal, and sometimes you can get lost into being a chameleon and trying to do everything you can. In the process of trying to do everything you can into getting that interview or getting across that next stage in the application process, but try to keep a sense of yourself, and that will ultimately make you the best physician that you can be. And yeah, try to convey that to the reader, the admissions committee on the other side. And we'll get to a little bit of some of the tips and tricks later, but try to stay true to your true self, and you will inherently just come off as really unique and an asset to any student body.
Okay, on that note, let's touch on tips to help create a compelling narrative. If I can just have this slide work for me 1 second. All right, there we go. Okay.
The first tip, always be honest. In medicine, and your integrity is so important, especially because there's going to be times in your career where you might make a mistake, you might do something wrong, and it's so important to always own up to all of your experiences, all of your challenges, and also in addition to kind of your successes. And so make sure that you're always honest throughout your application. Do not fabricate any aspects, however small. Don't kind of oversell your role in something, or, of course, don't blatantly say that you were participating in an activity when you didn't, as that can lead to serious consequences, both if they discover it during the application, but also in the future. I've seen students with admissions offers rescinded if they weren't entirely honest on their application, and that came out later. So please, please, please do yourself a favor. Always be honest. And when you're presenting the best version of yourself, that includes that. And the other piece is, you want to have a cohesive narrative, but you do not want to repeat information or repeat stories or kind of tell the same narrative without demonstrating it in different ways. And so with every part of your application, you want to add new information. So that means that your personal statement, even though you can talk about some of the activities on your activities section of the MCAS, you want to talk about them in a different way than you do in the activities section, than you do in your most meaningful essays, than you do even in your secondary application. And this is really where reflection early in the process helps, because you can come up with different stories. And, even if the narrative should be the same, right? If it's, service to others, if it's research, but you really want to highlight different aspects, and you can talk about the same kind of experience, whether it was a volunteer experience or research experience, but you want to make sure to highlight different qualities, different values, a different story that shows, who you are, the kind of physician you'll be, and also that supports your narrative and that, main theme that you chose at the beginning. And so, again, really important, don't repeat the same details. It'll make the person reading your application kind of gloss over, and we're not going to be paying as much attention if you're not presenting kind of yourself in different ways to support your narrative. So make sure that you're always expanding on things that you've shared.
And in terms of expanding on your experiences, try to show people what happened. Don't just tell them. I always tell my mentees, try to put the reader into the exact setting, or like through your eyes. What did it feel like? What did it smell like? What were you hearing? Is it like the beeps of the OR, or is it this like controlled chaos of the emergency department? It makes the reading way, way, way more enjoyable. The one thing that is that you can do now, for those of you who aren't in the thick of the application process now, is keep a log of all of the memorable patient interactions you've had, because that will be easier for you to kind of draw on versus the last minute when you're scrambling to put things together. And that is honestly how physicians talk to one another too. A lot of my memorable my most memorable experiences throughout residency and medical school was through the patients that I see that have impacted me, whether professionally from a knowledge base, or just emotionally, or other things that have impacted me, that shaped me as a physician. So try to keep a log of, or a diary of, all the patients that you see, because that will come easier later on. And embrace all the imperfections of your application. I think that, I'll say this with a caveat: your weaknesses should be framed after talking about your weaknesses. Try to frame it and spin it into a more positive note in the application part. Don't just dwell on your weakness and how you'll never improve. Try to sway it so that it could potentially be a strength, or something that you're striving to get better at. And talking about your weaknesses in your application will make you that much more relatable for the readers. And so don't shy away from that. Although try to change it at the end to make it something and land that essay on a more positive note.
Agreed. And landing on a more positive note or showing kind of what you learned from that experience and applying it to a different similar situation to demonstrate that you can learn and grow. That always makes a challenge more impactful for the reader. In terms of other tips, again, be yourself, be genuine, tell your story in your own voice. I think one common pitfall I'm seeing more and more recently are students relying on ChatGPT or other AI tools, which can be helpful when you're just having it look for any grammar mistakes, etc. But really make sure that your voice is shining through so that we know who you are. And also when we're interviewing you, we're not caught off guard. And it adds to this consistent narrative of who you are as a person, especially if it's aligned in your interview, when we meet you in person or virtually with your essays and application. Again, be honest about all your experiences, your motivations and aspirations, as we really value authenticity. Don't try to be the applicant you think a school wants. Really be yourself and try to align it with, parts of the school's mission, but you don't need to kind of change your interest to try to get in. Again, the people reading your applications will be busy physicians, so try to be as concise and clear as possible. Keep your narrative tight and focused. Avoid unnecessary details. Really provide the most important details or the minimum necessary information for us to understand your message or the story you're trying to share, so that it's clear and easy to follow, and so that we, want to continue to read and don't get distracted or zone out from extraneous detail. And of course, the most important, piece in creating a narrative is making sure that you're connecting your experiences. So what are the common themes in them, and showing the impact of each activity. So how did it contribute to your pursuit of medicine as a career? Or alternatively, what did you learn from that experience that will make you a better physician or prepare you for the rigors and challenges of medical training and medical school?
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much. I feel like I learned so much from that, just from those past 2 slides. So we've reached the Q&A section of our webinar. So if you have any questions for our panelists, Jason and Bima, please feel free to type a question in the chat box and they will go ahead and answer it for you. I feel like I forgot to mention this at the beginning, but if I did, this is just another reminder that this section or webinar will be recorded. So if you want to go back and review, or if you missed something, we'll be sending this out to all registries tomorrow morning. So stay on the lookout for that. And then on the screen here, the Q&A screen, you'll also see that same QR code that we saw earlier. If you scan it, that's where you'll book your free consultation. And don't forget that 10% off coupon that we shared earlier. And yeah, we'll just wait until we get a question. But I know, Bima, you mentioned you had a really great example of how somebody used their real life experience of working at Chipotle to kind of touch on how they would use kind of similar skills in surgery. Jason, I was wondering if you had any examples that we could maybe share with our attendees about something similar, like a really great narrative or a really great story that kind of came through when you were reviewing applications.
Oh, that's a great question. Let me think about that.
Okay, we'll give you some time.
While Dr. Gomez is brainstorming, I just wanted to mention that on the note of ChatGPT, that is definitely something that I think a lot of, at least from a lot of admission committees that I've spoken to, we don't necessarily know what to do with it yet, but just please use it smartly, and just know that ChatGPT and large language models can hallucinate, and which means that they could potentially draw on experiences that have never happened before. And so make sure you proofread everything that you feed into any large language model so that it represents your application as truthfully and as ethically as possible.
Such a great point. Okay, I think all of the questions that never mind, we got one. Okay, Elena says, hi there. I think one thing I may find myself struggling with is staying under the word count or word limit, especially when trying to set the scene. What would be your advice in regards to writing personal statements and trying to get your message across while also not surpassing the word limit? What a great question.
I'm happy to start. I think the advice I give here is this will come in edits. I think as you're starting to write, it's okay to go past the word count and really just try to, write as much of the details that you think are relevant. And then it's really in the editing process that you're going to be vicious. And so something that I see a lot of students, again, going back to the point around, just avoiding extraneous detail is that you'll find that you can actually start much later and that you don't get to your point until after a few sentences of typing. And so really starting in the middle or trying to be concise around, there's not much scene setting that you need to do. It can be done in one sentence. It could be, when I was volunteering as an EMT, I saw this patient who was seen for XYZ, and this is what I took away from that experience. So, you don't need to you're not writing a fiction novel or really, there's no need for all of the extraneous detail unless it's something, there are some details that might be important. Like if it's a patient who had a language barrier and you kind of help support them through that experience, then, that's a piece that I'll need to know as a reader to understand the impact on you that it had. But, I think you can't edit a blank page. So the most important step is really to start writing, and then you can kind of figure out what is extraneous and what you can edit out. But usually, allow yourself to go over the word count, and then you can always edit.
Yeah, I agree with Dr. Gomez. I still do this now for my research papers, but my first draft is always just a draft of my stream of consciousness and word vomit. And I just word vomit onto the paper and give myself a couple days before going back and editing. And you can always, go back and edit it. Also, that's actually important too, to keep different versions and be very organized with the different versions of your drafts. Try to put the date that you edit a draft within the name of your document. Then where I found that helpful is I say on Tuesday, I pared my initial draft down and eliminated a bunch of stuff. But then on Friday, as I'm going through, I realized that some of the things that I edited on Tuesday could potentially be useful. So then in that case, I'll go back to my draft on Monday to recapture all the things that I edited on Tuesday. And if you keep everything, all the drafts in one version, and unfortunately that will all be lost. So if you have enough, storage, the only limiting factor here is the storage in your Google Drive or your computer, and it doesn't cost you anything.
That's a really great point. Especially for secondaries, you'll find a lot of schools ask similar questions or questions that you can use similar stories or experiences, but they'll have different word counts or limits. And so that way you don't have to, and completely reinvent the wheel, but you can recycle some of the work that you've written earlier. So the whole process gets easier the more you write and the further you get along.
Amazing. Thanks, Elena, for the question. And thank you, Bima and Jason, for answering that. Any more questions for us? Okay, I think that means that we can call it. So I want to say thank you to everybody for joining us. I really hope you learned something new today. Thank you, Bima and Jason, for your insights. I know we all learned a lot here. Like I said, we'll be sending out this webinar to all attendees tomorrow, so stay tuned for that. And in the meantime, we will join you for our next webinar happening next week. So stay tuned for that as well. Take care, everyone, and have a great night. Bye.